Gaul, Caesar's greatest military achievement. In 58 BCE, one man changed everything. Julius Caesar, a Roman politician drowning in debt and desperate for glory, looked north to this unconquered land and saw his destiny. Welcome back to Chapters in History. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the military campaign that transformed both Caesar and Rome forever, the conquest of Gaul. Over 8 bloody years, Caesar would fight over 30 battles, siege dozens of cities, and face down a coalition of virtually every tribe in Gaul. He would cross the Rhine, invade Britain twice, and ultimately bring an area larger than modern France under Roman control. But this wasn't just a military campaign. It was a masterclass in strategy, politics, and propaganda that would make Caesar the richest man in Rome and set him on a collision course with destiny. The question isn't whether Caesar conquered Gaul. The question is how one man with a handful of legions managed to subdue millions of fierce warriors and change the course of Western civilization forever.
Chapter 1. The Man and the Moment.
To understand Caesar's conquest of Gaul, we first need to understand Caesar himself in 58 BCE. He wasn't yet the legendary figure we know from history. He was a 42-year-old politician with expensive tastes, massive debts, and powerful enemies. Caesar owed the equivalent of millions of modern dollars to Roman moneylenders. His lavish lifestyle and political bribes had left him financially ruined. Worse, his enemies in the Senate were circling like vultures, ready to prosecute him for corruption the moment he left office. But Caesar was also brilliant, ruthless, and desperate, a dangerous combination. As consul in 59 BCE, he maneuvered to secure the governorship of Gaul, a province that included not just the already conquered southern region, but also the vast unconquered territories beyond. Gaul was home to dozens of Celtic tribes, the Helvitii, the Belgae, the Arverni, and many others. These weren't primitive barbarians as Roman propaganda suggested. They were sophisticated societies with advanced metalworking, extensive trade networks, and military traditions going back centuries. The Gauls had professional warriors, complex political alliances, and intimate knowledge of their homeland's terrain. They had successfully resisted Roman expansion for generations and had no intention of submitting to Caesar's ambitions. But Caesar saw opportunity where others saw danger. Gaul was rich in gold, slaves, and agricultural land. A successful conquest would solve his financial problems, provide him with veteran legions loyal to him personally, and give him the military reputation needed to challenge his rivals in Rome. Chapter 2. The Helvitii. First Blood. Caesar's opportunity came in 58 BCE, when the Helvitii tribe decided to migrate from their mountain homeland in modern Switzerland to the fertile plains of Western Gaul. This wasn't just a small group. We're talking about nearly 400,000 people, including 90,000 warriors. The migration route would take the Helvitii through Roman territory, and they demanded passage. Traditional Roman diplomacy might have involved negotiations, treaties, or bribes.
Caesar chose war.
What happened next demonstrated the military genius that would define Caesar's career. While the Helvitii were still organizing their massive migration, Caesar mobilized his legions with lightning speed, recruited additional forces, and positioned himself to block their route. The decisive battle came at Bibracte. Caesar faced nearly 90,000 Gallic warriors, with just 4 legions, roughly 24,000 men. The Romans were outnumbered almost 4 to 1, but Caesar's legions were professional soldiers, with superior training, equipment, and discipline. More importantly, Caesar himself proved to be a tactical genius, using the terrain and his soldiers' mobility to offset the Gallic numerical advantage. At the crucial moment, when his line began to waver under Gallic pressure, Caesar did something that would become his trademark. He grabbed a shield, joined the front rank, and led his soldiers personally into the fight. The result was a crushing Roman victory. The Helvetii were forced to return to their homeland, and Caesar had sent a message to every tribe in Gaul. Rome had a new kind of general. Chapter 3. The German Threat. Crossing the Rhine. Caesar's next challenge came from an unexpected direction. Across the Rhine River, a German king named Ariovistus had been invited into Gaul by one faction of the Sequani tribe to help them against their enemies. But Ariovistus had no intention of leaving. He began settling German tribes west of the Rhine and demanded tribute from Gallic tribes. Worse, from Caesar's perspective, he was creating a power base that could threaten Roman interests for generations. Gallic tribes that had previously been hostile to Rome now came begging for protection against the German king. Caesar saw both a threat and an opportunity. The confrontation began with diplomacy. Caesar and Ariovistus met in a carefully staged conference, each trying to intimidate the other. Ariovistus was physically imposing and surrounded by fierce German bodyguards, but Caesar was unimpressed. When Ariovistus demanded that Caesar mind his own business, Caesar responded with typical Roman arrogance. All of Gaul was now Rome's business. The battle that followed near modern Mulhouse demonstrated another aspect of Caesar's genius, his ability to adapt his tactics to different enemies. The Germans fought differently than the Gauls, using massive infantry wedges and relying on initial shock rather than sustained combat. Caesar anticipated this and deployed his legions in a formation that could absorb the German charge and then counterattack. The result was another decisive victory, and Ariovistus fled back across the Rhine. But Caesar wasn't finished. To demonstrate Roman power and deter future German intervention, he ordered his engineers to build a bridge across the Rhine, the first time Roman legions had ever crossed that legendary river. The bridge was both an engineering marvel and a psychological weapon. Caesar spent only 18 days on the German side of the Rhine, but the message was clear: Rome could strike anywhere, anytime. Chapter 4. The Belgian Confederation, Rome's greatest test. Caesar's victories had united his enemies. The Belgian tribes of northern Gaul formed the largest military coalition ever assembled against Rome. Over 300,000 warriors from dozens of tribes, all united by a single goal: destroy Caesar's legions before Rome could conquer them all. The Belgae were considered the fiercest warriors in Gaul. They had never been conquered, lived in the harshest regions, and had military traditions that went back centuries. Their coalition included the Nervii, Ambierones, and Adoaciuci, names that struck fear into Roman hearts. Caesar was facing the greatest military challenge of his career. His 8 legions, roughly 50,000 men, were outnumbered 6-1. Worse, he was fighting on their home territory, in forests and marshes where Roman tactical advantages were minimized. The campaign nearly ended in disaster at the Sabis River, modern Samber. Caesar's legions were crossing the river when they were ambushed by 60,000 Nervii warriors, who had been hiding in the dense forests. The attack came so suddenly that Roman soldiers barely had time to grab their weapons. 2 legions were completely surrounded and in danger of annihilation. Caesar's entire campaign hung in the balance. Once again, Caesar's personal leadership made the difference. He seized a shield from a fallen soldier, pushed through to the front lines, and personally rallied his panicking troops. His presence transformed a rout into a fighting retreat. But what really saved Caesar was Roman military training. Even in chaos, Roman soldiers instinctively formed defensive formations, created shield walls, and fought as units rather than individuals. The battle turned when Caesar's reserves arrived and caught the Nervii from behind. The result was one of the bloodiest battles of the entire Gallic Wars. The Nervii were virtually exterminated as a fighting force. Caesar's victory over the Belgian Confederation broke the back of organized Gallic resistance, at least temporarily. Tribe after tribe submitted to Rome, and Caesar's reputation spread throughout the Celtic world. Chapter 5. The Ultimate Gamble. Britain. With Gaul largely pacified, Caesar set his sights on the ultimate prize, Britain. The island beyond the ocean was legendary throughout the ancient world, home to doctorates, fierce warriors, and unimaginable riches. Caesar's decision to invade Britain was audacious beyond belief. No Roman had ever crossed the ocean successfully. The island was defended by unknown numbers of warriors. The weather was treacherous, and Caesar would be completely cut off from reinforcements. But Caesar understood propaganda as well as military strategy. A successful invasion of Britain would make him the most famous general in Roman history and give him political capital that no rival could match. The first invasion in 55 BCE was essentially a large-scale reconnaissance mission. Caesar landed with 2 legions, fought several battles against British tribes, and took hostages before returning to Gaul. The campaign was only partially successful militarily, but it was a propaganda masterpiece. Rome went wild with excitement over their general who had conquered the ends of the earth. Caesar returned the following year with 5 legions and cavalry, nearly 30,000 men. This second invasion was more successful, penetrating deep into British territory and forcing several tribes to submit. But the Britons, led by a king named Cassivellaunus, proved masters of guerrilla warfare. They avoided pitched battles, harassed Roman supply lines, and used their knowledge of the terrain to frustrate Caesar's conventional tactics. Eventually, Caesar achieved his primary goals. He had proven that Britain could be invaded, secured tribute and hostages, and added another incredible chapter to his legend. But permanent conquest would have to wait for future generations.
Chapter 6. Vercingetorix, the Great Rebellion.
Just when Caesar thought Gaul was conquered, everything changed. In 52 BCE, a young Arverni nobleman named Vercingetorix did something no Gallic leader had managed before. He united virtually every tribe in Gaul against Rome. Vercingetorix was everything Caesar's previous enemies hadn't been. He was young, charismatic, intelligent, and he understood both Gallic strengths and Roman weaknesses. Most importantly, he learned from Caesar's previous victories. Instead of meeting Caesar in pitched battles where Roman discipline gave them the advantage, Vercingetorix employed a scorched earth strategy. He burned crops, destroyed supplies, and forced Caesar's legions to march through a wasteland. The strategy was brilliant and nearly worked. Caesar's legions were starving, his Gallic allies were defecting, and for the first time in his career, he was facing a truly unified enemy. At Gergovia, Vercingetorix inflicted Caesar's first major defeat in Gaul. The Romans were forced to retreat, leaving their siege equipment behind, a humiliation that sent shockwaves throughout the Celtic world. The victory electrified Gaul. Tribes that had submitted to Rome declared for Vercingetorix. Caesar's entire conquest seemed to be unraveling, but then Vercingetorix made a crucial mistake. Confident after his victory at Gergovia, he withdrew his army to the hill fort of Alesia, believing the massive fortress was impregnable. Alesia was indeed formidable, a massive oppidum on a plateau surrounded by steep valleys. It housed not just Vercingetorix's army of 80,000 warriors, but also thousands of civilians. Caesar's response demonstrated the engineering genius that made Roman armies unique. Instead of assaulting the fortress directly, he built 2 massive walls around Alesia, one to keep the Gauls in, and another to keep relieving armies out. The circumvallation and contravallation walls, stretched for miles, included spike-filled traps, sharpened stakes, and even hidden pits with spears. It was one of the greatest engineering achievements in military history.
Chapter 7. Alesia, the final showdown.
The siege of Alesia became the climactic battle not just of the Gallic Wars, but of Caesar's entire career. A relief army of 250,000 Gallic warriors marched to break the siege and destroy Caesar's legions once and for all. Caesar was now trapped between 2 enormous Gallic armies, Vercingetorix's 80,000 warriors inside Alesia and the 250,000 relief force outside his walls. His 8 legions, roughly 50,000 men, were outnumbered nearly 7 to 1. The final battle was unlike anything in ancient warfare. Caesar had to fight on 3 fronts simultaneously, against sorties from Alesia, attacks on his inner wall, and assaults on his outer fortifications. At the climactic moment, when his lines were breaking under the massive Gallic assault, Caesar played his final card. He led his cavalry in a surprise attack from behind the Gallic relief army, creating panic and confusion in their ranks. The sight of Caesar's distinctive red cloak appearing behind their lines had a devastating psychological effect on the Gallic warriors. They believed they were surrounded and began to flee. Seeing his relief army in full retreat, Vercingetorix made the decision that would end the Gallic Wars forever. In a ceremony designed to save his people from Roman vengeance, he rode out of Alesia in full armor and threw down his weapons at Caesar's feet. With Vercingetorix's surrender, organized Gallic resistance collapsed. Caesar had achieved what no Roman general before him had managed: the complete conquest of Gaul.
Chapter 8. The Legacy. What Caesar's conquest really meant.
Caesar's conquest of Gaul was more than just a military victory. It was a transformation that shaped Western civilization for centuries to come. In 8 years, he had brought an area the size of modern France under Roman control. But the price was enormous. Modern historians estimate that Caesar's wars killed over 1 million Gauls and enslaved another million. Entire tribes were wiped out or scattered. Celtic culture, which had flourished for centuries, was systematically suppressed.
Yet Caesar's conquest also brought roads, cities, laws, and trade networks that would benefit the region for centuries.
Roman Gaul became one of the richest provinces in the empire, and Gallic soldiers would eventually become some of Rome's most loyal troops. For Caesar personally, the conquest solved all his problems and created new ones. He returned to Rome unimaginably wealthy, with veteran legions loyal to him personally and a military reputation that rivaled the gods. But his very success made him a threat to the Roman Republic. His enemies in the Senate demanded that he disband his armies and return to Rome as a private citizen, where they could prosecute him for his illegal actions as consul. Caesar's refusal led directly to the civil war that would destroy the Roman Republic forever. The man who conquered Gaul would ultimately conquer Rome itself, becoming dictator and paving the way for the empire. Final chapter. Conclusion. When you drive through modern France today, you're still following roads that Caesar's legions built. When you visit cities like Lyon, Paris, or Marseille, you're walking where Roman soldiers once marched. The conquest of Gaul didn't just change ancient history, it shaped the world we live in today. Caesar's Gallic Wars represent both the best and worst of human ambition. They showcase incredible military genius, engineering prowess, and strategic thinking. But they also remind us of the terrible cost of conquest and the price paid by those who stood in Rome's way. Caesar himself called the conquest of Gaul his greatest achievement, and it's hard to argue. In 8 years, he transformed himself from a debt-ridden politician into the most powerful man in the ancient world. What do you think? Was Caesar a military genius or a brutal conqueror? Could the Celtic tribes have won if they'd united sooner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient military history, make sure to subscribe to Chapters in History for more stories of conquest, strategy, and the personalities that shaped our world. Until next time, remember that history's greatest achievements often come at history's greatest costs.